Earlier this month, a young woman, a pretty recent graduate of Penn State University, disappeared from her workplace after showing up for her late night shift. Someone saw her go into what they described was a dark SUV, and that was the last time that she was seen. Of course, we're talking about Kada Scott. Tonight, we're going to welcome Joseph Scott Morgan to talk about the forensic side of this case that maybe you and I have questions about. Stick with me. This video contains mature themes and discussions intended only for adult audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello there, my friend, and welcome back to the show for another true crime conversation with me. My name is Gavin Fish. Right next to me, virtually, is my friend Joseph Scott Morgan. Joseph, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
You always bend over backwards to hang out with me, and I really appreciate it.
Oh man, you're my brother from another mother. I love hanging out with you guys. It's a lot of fun. It's relaxed compared to a lot of stuff that I have to do, and we can just have a conversation. That's if I could ever have like total control over, and I love my podcast that I do. But if I could ever do something, I would just want something where I had a cup of coffee in front of me and just having a convo with folks, and
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it. I enjoy it, and I love the style. So yeah, and I don't get to do this as much as I would like to.
Well, speaking of your podcast, I was just listening to the episode from a couple of days ago on Kada Scott with that's Dave Mack, your co-host, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You,
Dave.
you
Yeah,
guys have a very cool conversational style.
we do, and Dave's the real pro. Because this man has actually been in radio since he was 14.
Oh yeah.
Just let that sink in, and he's my age. He's forgotten more than I will ever learn, particularly at this stage in life. And he's got one of those perfect radio voices too.
Yeah, he
You know,
does.
he's got that. There's not too much of that. That fry. That you have in the voice. He's
Or
really good.
the vocal vomit of the guys that do the commercials like this. He doesn't do that, right?
Yeah, I know. And I'll tease him about that. I'll say things like, "Hey, I'm Johnny Midnight, and I'm spinning records until 3 in the morning or whatever," and he'll laugh about that. And he can do all that stuff. But where his expertise comes in is his. I guess in times past they would refer to it as engineering, but he's a heck of a producer, and he's great at what he does. We do 3 episodes per week, and that's a lift because he's one of the primary producers for Nancy Grace, and so that in and of itself is a full-time gig for anybody, because that show is high volume, it's labor intensive because you're cutting in video, and now it's part of the Fox One family. So he's right in the heart of that every single day. This man, he never stops. I mean, it is rare that he stops. So yeah, I bow to his greatness. He's a wonderful, wonderful cat, and I'm privileged to call him my friend.
Well, you guys have a cool back and forth. Your voices complement each other really well, and
Oh,
your expertise obviously does too. It's a
well,
good listen. So
yeah, well,
yeah,
thank
check out Body Bags, guys. Let's see. I found it on iHeart. Let me bring it up right here. Right,
you. Yeah, yeah,
it's an iHeart podcast, and
yeah.
yeah, the name of the episode is "Smelly Dirt, Maggots, and Shallow Grave," which
Yeah.
leads us into, I mean, the conversation that I wanted to have with you. That this crime, Kada Scott. Let me bring up her photo here. Kada was a young woman, pretty recently graduated from Penn State. I think she graduated in 2023, is what I understand. But she's working the graveyard shift at an assisted living center.
Yeah.
She's recently gotten into beauty pageants. In fact, one of the questions that people often ask me is, why do some cases get into the public zeitgeist and some don't? And it's actually not all that common. Gwen Eiffel, I think, called it middle class white woman syndrome, right?
Mhm.
Kada doesn't fit the mold that I think most editorial staffs are used to covering, but for some reason, um, she broke into the zeitgeist, and I'm glad that she did because I think that attention on a case
Mhm.
does push the authorities to maybe push a little bit harder, and I think they did a great
Yeah.
job anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I would take exception to that on one point. I think that those individuals, and I'm not diminishing the victims in any way, but I'm merely kind of saying what I know about the media. If someone is young, beautiful, and attractive, it has nothing to do with race. When you can throw images up that we've seen a lot of her, in her Penn State uni,
Yeah,
and we've seen her certainly, in pageant competition, and she's got a compelling story. Yeah, that's and that's what that's what any producer that's out there, and it doesn't matter what your view of any particular network is. That's what they're looking for. I think a lot of people labor under this idea that the people that you see relaying the information to you on the screen, when you're staring at a television show or whatever, um, that's not who's, cultivating all of this. It's the producers that are
yes,
backstage, the button pushers, the people that are talking into their ears, that sort of thing. And I think a lot of talking heads, and they hate that term, but they're they're just kind of a speaker, it's blasting out information that's actually coming from a control room. They prepared these scripts, they have all the data points that they're looking for, and they're saying, what's going to resonate with our audience. And so, yeah, there is a problem, and I've talked about this with Jean Bonnet for years now. As a matter of fact, I really stay away from the Jean Bonnet case because I had, um, during the course of my career in Atlanta and New Orleans, I had a lot of young girls that were killed, went missing. Their cases were never solved, or there wasn't as much urgency about it,
hmm
and cases go cold. And the last I checked, there were like, I don't know, something like 26 books or something, and I'm sure that number's increased about the Jean Bonnet case. And you know, they start throwing around terms like America's sweetheart, and she really captured the soul of America. It's like, no, no. I mean, I've sat in rooms with parents that are weeping, you
right,
know, and trying to comfort them, and their tears are just as salty as Ramsey's tears. Trust me.
sure. No, that I think that just I don't know on a the lizard part of our brain, like the beast
Yeah,
of our brain,
yeah.
we value beauty, we
Oh,
value
we do. Yeah.
attractiveness, and you know the Jean Benet Ramsey case has bothered me for a long time just because she was so young and a beauty queen, the and the and the nation lapped it up, and I just thought
It,
it was
it
so
is.
inappropriate, man. I just thought it was
Well,
so
it
wrong.
is, and yeah, and um, I think the thing, that caught everybody's, I mean, let's face it, it was salacious, when
Yeah,
you started seeing these images, and we don't like to talk about that, but it really was salacious, and immediately I'm remembering back all those years, and I was working in the field as a practitioner. As a matter of fact, this is an interesting little bit of trivia. I was working in Atlanta I was still with the ME, in Atlanta the night that Patsy died, and she died in the Atlanta area. And I
hmm.
was actually on duty, and she was in hospice at that point. And you would not believe the phone calls that I got from
Oh
news
yeah,
agencies all over the country because they thought that, we had something to do with it. And, most well, if you're on hospice, those cases by law are not reportable to the coroner or the medical examiner. So we have no awareness of when a hospice patient dies, for instance. At least in the jurisdictions I've worked in, it might be different elsewhere, but in our jurisdictions, it's like, and sometimes that used to apply to nursing homes, but now the situation at many nursing homes is so bad. There have been people that have gone back and said, no, anybody that dies in a nursing home needs to be reported to the ME or the coroner, because we got to check and see if there's neglect, abuse, all those sorts of things. And I think a lot of people would really be surprised, um, really be surprised at how much nefarious activity
That's sad.
goes on with that. Yeah, it breaks my heart. I love the aged, because I'm approaching that that time period, and my grandparents held a very honored place in my life, and I just hate, I just hate it. I hate it when it's like little kids, and they're at the mercy. So anyway, I don't mean to
Yeah.
chase rabbits here, but you get me started talking about
No,
this stuff.
no. Well,
Yeah,
in this case, I think Kata's family successfully leveraged the media, and she was a beautiful young woman. She was a
hmm,
woman with bright prospects. She was college educated,
yep,
but you're right. They had photography of her, and they had her. They went to social media, and and that captured our attention. I think that's a good thing.
yeah,
Now, I want to kind of dive into the traditional forensic side of this, because I think
mhm,
a lot of this case was solved through digital forensics, according
yeah,
to what we learned from the probable cause affidavit.
mm,
And unfortunately, for a lot of us chasing information, this is Pennsylvania. We're not going to get information in Pennsylvania like we would in Florida or Idaho or Arizona or a lot of other states that are way more open. We pretty much have all we're going to get until a trial, if there is one, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
so they used a lot of digital forensics to
hmm,
get to narrowing down basically the the camera feed over
hmm,
at the
at the
community
high
center,
school.
right?
Yeah,
Or was
community
it high
center.
school?
Yeah.
Yeah, something.
Well, yeah, they've got the new school, and then there's there's all these other adjacent structures that are around there too. And we can go into this, but yeah, I mean, yeah, there are digital breadcrumbs throughout the thing, and there's still there's still a lot that hasn't been revealed to this point, and they're not going to reveal it. You've got somebody that's now been charged in this case, and they're not going to show their hand. And the tempo that we run at, I think the um, the public gets very frustrated very quickly, about a lack of information. And I know I sound like a broken record, talking about this, but that's part of it. We because this thing has got to be adjudicated. It's got to make it through the courts. And
Yeah.
um, we're a sports analogy here. If you're on a football team, you're not going to take your playbook over to the opposing team and say, here's what we're going to be doing. And if you look at it that way, that kind of explains a lot, because you don't want anybody to wiggle off the hook, particularly, well, you don't want anybody that is rightly charged, to wiggle off the hook. And you want to make sure that dotted all your I's and crossed your T's. So and that's what happens. And that's kind of the status that we're in right now.
Yeah, and this is my home state. For those of you who don't know, I live in Western Pennsylvania, so I'm on the other side of the Commonwealth from Philadelphia. The way that it works here is he has a preliminary hearing that is scheduled, I think, for November 10th. Now
Mm,
he could waive it. He has the right to waive his preliminary hearing,
yeah.
but typically speaking, you do get a little information at the preliminary
Yeah.
hearing.
You
The
will.
issue, though, is that in Pennsylvania, you can't bring digital anything into any courtroom. You can't record, you
No.
can't broadcast, you can't do anything. All you can do as a reporter is take your little pen and pad and go in there and
Yeah.
take notes as fast as you can.
Yeah, and and trust me, I do know this. They're going to be uh, there's going to be such a media pool for this, and there's going to be people jockeying for position.
Yeah.
I saw this a lot during my coverage of and working, kind of painting the story relative to the Piketon massacre down in Ohio. By the way, there's still one case in that. in that series of homicides that still has yet to be adjudicated. And it was really weird. And this is for the trial, so it's not necessarily the same thing, but there were certain times that they would allow cameras in the court, and there were other times where the people that were testifying, including defendants, could say, "No, I don't want a court. I don't want a camera in the court." It's really kind of an odd thing. So
Mm.
you're dependent upon the pool reporter. This happened. Let's see, where else did this happen? Well, it happens every day in federal court
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you don't have cameras in the federal court, and
That's right.
there are many many cases like this where you're reliant, and hopefully those people that are picked to be the representative of the media, uh, they come out and they just state the facts, they take copious notes, and we'll get data at that point in time. But right you are, Gavin. There will be a
Yeah.
bit of data that's going to come out at that.
Now, just so viewers know, I am in touch with the AOPC, which is the Administrative Office of Judi I can't remember what it is. It's the office that oversees all that stuff in the Commonwealth. And
Okay.
I
Clerk
have
of court,
told,
like the clerk of court. Yeah.
yeah, and I've just told them that I would like to have credentials to go. The
Oh, I see.
likelihood, the likelihood is really low because you're right. There will be a lot of people
Oh,
that
yeah,
are
there will be.
jockeying for that. Uh, and so if I do get my credentials, I'll drive down there and I'll go for the preliminary hearing. If not, I will just depend on, like you said, the reporters that are in there and see what they said. Okay, let's get into the forensic side of this because
Mhm.
it appears to me anyway that uh, well, and it appears to police too. They have said this. I think District Attorney Krasner said it that they believe, and it's in the PCA. They believe that um, that Kada was killed on the 4th, pretty much
Mm,
within a few hours of when she was
yeah,
kidnapped.
right.
Her body wasn't found until the 18th. Now, there's a couple interesting things that I'd love your take on. Number
Mhm.
one is there was a tip. Actually, these are related. Numbers one and two are
Okay.
there was a tip that her body was on that property, right?
Right.
On the middle school
Yeah.
property. They go there, they can't find anything. Then another tip comes in that kind of sounds to me like, oh, you did not look in the right place. Here is the place to go.
I
I
thought the
am
same thing.
curious what that means to you, knowing that little bit of information that the DA has released.
That says to me the word intimate comes up, intimate knowledge. And so I think that there's, at least to my way of thinking, first blush, we'll say that, is that there's going to be connectivity to whoever this is and the accused. And I don't know if he's, you know, run his mouth about something, perhaps, uh, and was bragging, or has had a decompensation at some point in time, where he realized what he had done, and he's wanting to unburden himself, if you will, and somebody has chosen to remain anonymous. That when Dave and I were covering Kata's case a few days ago, and we taped that episode, and we just did the forensics, just talked about it, and you listened to it. So um, that was something that kind of drove my interest, because I think that, like so many cases now, this thing is going to rise and fall with digital info. It's going to rise and fall with phone calls. I'd like to know the platform in which a tip is received, to
Yeah.
try to understand that, see if there's any kind of connectivity electronically, with that point of origin. When did somebody respond to this? How did they respond? And I'm talking about the law enforcement officials, because they did, if I remember correctly, they did an initial pass through, and then they had to go back out. And they had been searching, and look, I mean, tip of the cap to them. They stayed on the trail, if you will,
Yeah.
and really pushed. But the entire time, mama and daddy are pushing too. They really put their shoulder to the stone. And can you imagine your child?
Right.
is missing.
Yeah.
And all of us kind of sit back and we think, well, what in the world would I do, if it was my baby that was missing? And they just, set their faces like flint and sallied forth into the maelstrom. And they were going to find her. They were going to do anything that they could in order to, to find their child. And I think that it paid off. However, I'm really interested in this individual's activities beforehand. I got to tell you that at one point in time, I was thinking, are there, because there's several vehicles that are involved in the scene
Right.
as well, and that's very confusing just from a logistics standpoint. Um, how do you move these vehicles around, reposition them? The burning of the vehicle, which again is mind-boggling, this thing was compacted so quickly,
Yeah.
which is an absolute nightmare from a forensic standpoint.
Well, let me
Um,
ask about that real quick. Let's
yeah,
talk about that car. So I don't. It's Philadelphia. Philadelphia. I have problems with anyway, but
yeah, no kidding.
um, we
Yeah, we
both
won't
do,
go down there.
right?
Yeah, the recent unpleasantness. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. But I mean, is it just so normal to have a car lit on fire that you're like, oh, well, there's another arson, chalk it up as an arson, tow this thing and crush it?
Yeah,
Because would there be any, like, because ostensibly she was murdered in that car.
yeah, there's a good chance of it, and I gotta tell you, I don't mean to make light of this, but it was when I heard this, what popped into my mind?
Hmm.
The scene from The Big Lebowski, where, uh, Jeff Bridges' character they find his car in the impound lot, and things are stolen out of it and everything, and he's talking to the cop that's in charge of the impound lot, and he says, well, do you guys have any leads? And the cop looks at him and starts laughing and says, yeah, leads, we got a whole team, they're working double shifts to work on
Right.
this car.
Yeah.
And so that's in a place like Philly that's so densely populated and you've got so many abandoned vehicles. It's nothing to come across a fully engulfed vehicle. That's not outside the norm.
That's another
It happened in
Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah, it happened in Atlanta. Um, I don't recall it happening so much in New Orleans, but if you find an open area, it's kind of sequestered to a certain bit, you can facilitate this. And again, you've got this. Is not like this is a lightning strike where it's struck the car as an act of God. The thing catches on fire, and cars, particularly if they're not running, generally do not catch on fire. It's not. It wouldn't be my first choice for a fuel source if I was going to roast weenies or
Sure.
marshmallows or something. So, automatically, my default position uh, is going to be arson. And most people that set fires relative to a scene don't realize most of the time when they're doing that, yeah, they're getting rid of some things, but they're creating more evidence as well because there's markers we look for and intentionally set fires that we can examine. We can bring whole teams of people in. I mean, if we want to, we can call them the ATF, and they're pretty much the best in the business when it comes to arson investigation. But
So do
it's
you think
common.
even with that crushed car?
It's going to be it's going to be a really tough hill to climb,
Yeah.
I think, because you literally would have to pull this thing apart. And I, again, having not seen the car, I don't, because I've seen crushed cars and then I've seen crushed cars, and
Right.
it all depends the machinery that was used, how it was facilitated, and how difficult it would be, and also the will of the law enforcement and the DA. If the DA wants to make it happen, they can make it happen. They can reach out to the feds because the feds have abilities that local, even Philly, local and state don't have. They can put a whole teams of nerds like myself on a bit of evidence like that, and they can be focused on it. They'll take it back to their lab, and then when you flip the switch on the feds, it's like, so once you flip that switch, you're going to have them on the stand as well. And again, that
Hmm.
makes for a very powerful presentation because they can go into so much greater detail than uh, not to slight locals or the state. And I don't
It's
think
it's
anybody would
about
take it that way.
resources though, right? Federal government just has more
Yeah, it
resources.
is. It's it's kind of unlimited in that sense. So um, yeah, for me, it's you know, I don't know. I wasn't aware of that, and Dave brought that up to me, and immediately, when we were doing like our pre-show meeting for that, I was like, you got to be kidding me, because I don't think in all the cases you hear about this, like if you've got in the old days, you would hear about this if somebody had a salvage yard and it was like mafia connected, and they could
Yeah,
take things and compact them and literally melt them down as well. But you don't, you just don't hear about this.
yeah.
It's such an oddball kind of thing.
Well, so getting back to the whole, I guess the anonymous tipster seems like it was
Mm,
probably the same person. I had the same reaction that you had. I kind of felt like Mr. King, Keon King is the guy who is accused of this. We should say it is
right.
an accusation, right? But
Hmm.
if Mr. King was involved, then it seemed to me like he was either running his mouth, or I think that there are at least two or three uh, not conspirators. What word am I looking for? But co,
Confederates? I don't
yeah,
know.
whatever,
Yeah,
Confederates.
yeah, yeah.
That so maybe one of them started talking. But I almost kind of feel that I kind of feel like a lot of criminal behavior is known within I guess the neighborhoods and the communities in which those criminals hang out, right, or live,
Mm,
and it's known, but nobody is going to flap their gums when the cops come, right? And I almost feel like in this case, they may have been bragging, they may have been, we'll do the same thing to you, threatening other people, but not expecting there to be such a public uproar that it
yeah,
just got out
yeah.
of hand.
Right. And I think that, and not that he has to have more shame thrown upon him, but shame on him if he thinks that, he was going to get away with it, and that they're that cavalier. And particularly something that is this brutal, because this is all, you don't just have the brutality of a kidnapping here. And I think probably there's some kind of sexual element to this as
I
well.
had
We can't
feared
prove
that
that at this
myself.
point,
Yeah.
because I don't know anything about clothing status at this point. But you've also got someone that will, in my opinion at least, will desecrate a human remain. And you say, well, Morgan, there's no indication that she was, there's some kind of post-mortem trauma. Just the fact that you would take her and go into this ratty area back in those woods, not that it would have been any better if she was in a federal park or something, but back in this area where there's all kinds of debris, uh, dig a shallow grave, or at least root out kind of an area or make access to a depressed area in the ground and stick her in there. Good and damn well that her mom and daddy are looking for her. And that's, you talk about heaping coals on top of the parents' heads along with this. And then, to take a board, you know, and put it over the mounded dirt. Yeah, that's desecration to me. So it's not just, it's not just the fact that she's kidnapped, the fact that she has been, I think, executed, perhaps sexually molested in some way, but it's what you do with the remains afterwards. And
Yeah.
when you see these cases in real time, like when you're viewing things at scene, sometimes, not all cases, but many times, it's like a punch in the face to you, because you begin to stack this stuff in your brain. And you're like, oh my lord. I think, have you ever heard, and I know that your audience is very well versed, as are you, Gavin. Um, People will talk about overcharging. You've heard about this, where
Oh,
prosecutors
yes.
will
Yeah.
overcharge people. Well, that is a real thing. People do overcharge, so that they're hoping they will shoot for the moon, but they're hoping if they miss, they're just going to miss, just shy of that. There are
Or that it will
cases,
scare a defendant into pleading, right?
yeah, to roll over on the case. But there are
Yeah.
those things, there are those moments where when you're working a case, the DA will get so into this case and so involved that they want to specifically charge, and they're going to create this huge laundry list of things. And it's not just the overcharging. It's like you have the ability, your statutory obligation gives you the ability to stack these charges like this. And I don't know if there will be more charges. There could be, particularly if you've got somebody, because we had mentioned that if he has got compatriots in this, um, you could get conspiracy charges, that
Yeah.
could come into this. And if he's the ringleader in a conspiracy, there are certain states out there. I don't know about the status of Pennsylvania. There are certain states that if you're the principal in a conspiracy, you can get the needle for that.
Yeah.
So
I
it's one of the qualifiers.
That was reminding me that one of the cases that I looked at very early on when I was kind of in my little YouTube journey was the case of Amanda Winkowski. And I don't know if I've talked to you about Amanda's case. It's a very important case to me. It was the very first
Mm,
time that I got an entire police file that included autopsy photos. She was exhumed, and a second autopsy was done, crime scene photos, all the police reports. It was the very first time I'd gotten that. And in her case, the medical examiner's office ruled her death an accidental overdose.
yeah.
Now, she didn't have any of the metabolites of the drug that she supposedly overdosed on
Hmm.
in
Right.
toxicology. But the thing that added insult to injury in that case is when they found Amanda's body, it was completely naked,
Hmm.
thrown away into a trash can, like those outside rollaway cans that you put
Yeah.
out to, right? Upside down in the Buffalo winter, she was frozen solid. And I thought, you can't you can't be as unloving as that. You can't be any more unloving
Yeah.
than that.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. Um, and it is. And look, again, I don't. And I'm not. Forgive me. I'm on a roll tonight. Um, I've had this conversation with multiple people over, I know, the span of the last 3 months, and going back 2 years ago when we were at CrimeCon, Dave and I, we actually did an entire uh, live taping of body bags there, and it was focused on dismemberment. And the reason I did that is um, I had dismemberment cases when I was working, 20-year career. Um, I've never seen the like of it that we have today. And
Oh,
that
really?
goes, yeah, yeah. And again, this is not based upon some kind of empirical data that I have. Um, but it seems to me there's been a significant uptick in the way people are actually treating bodies after they have committed homicide. And as a matter of fact, I mean, some of the things that I see, some of the stuff that we cover on body bags is so, even by my standard, which I've got a completely different template than everybody else,
Sure.
it shocks me. And I guess somebody could say that I'm kind of biased. Um, I'm I'm kind of biased in that way. Maybe I'm looking for it, but there are a number of cases that are out there that involve some type of desecration of remains and maltreatment of human remains. Um, and so it's like you have a homicide, and some of these homicides are horrible the way the people died because they're torturous. You got multiple injuries, a
Yeah.
lot of overkill, but then you don't think it can get any worse. And then you have this, and this is happening just repeatedly over and over and over again. It's not a manifestation I'm seeing just simply in the U.S. It's something that I'm actually seeing manifested in other countries as well.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's because the labor involved in this is so over the top. Um, and these are people that have not worked in a morgue like I have, where they spent a lot of hours doing prosecting on human remains. It's, I have a callus built up to it.
Yeah.
Um, these are people that have never been exposed to this. How do you go about
Hopefully.
doing it? Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah,
that's the thing is maybe they have, and that's uh,
yeah, yeah. That's one other piece to consider to this. And back to this defendant that we're talking about in Katie's case, and this is kind of the interesting tieback, I think, in one small way at least. Forgive me, I was just thinking about this as well. This alleged perpetrator has also got a history of this other violent act,
yeah,
that he had committed. That I don't know if it was like an kind of an inchoate event, where he didn't get to complete what he was going to do or whatever it was. I have no idea, but uh, it was over the top, and maybe he's on a learning curve. Maybe there are other victims. I have no idea, but so if he has people that have knowledge of this particular case, if that's our supposition here, what about the earlier case? The
right.
earlier case, are there people that could be involved or have an awareness with that one as well?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now, okay, I keep trying to get here, and we have fascinating
Sorry,
little sidetracks, which are awesome. I love
I'm
them.
shutting my mouth. There you go.
No, 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 no. I'm loving this, but okay, getting back to the body,
Hmm.
it appears that Kata's body was in the car for some amount of time, right? Couple days,
Hmm.
something like that.
Yep.
And then on the 18th, or I can't remember exactly what the timeline is here, but they do bury her in a small grave. On the 18th, they found, according to the PCA here, it says, following an anonymous tip, detectives conducted a grid search at the Ada Lewis Middle School. Freshly disturbed soil was located along the northeast perimeter. Excavation revealed human remains consistent with a young female. A silver gold earring matching one near the burial site was recovered by the rec center gate. I thought that was an interesting little piece of information. And then the following day, the ME's office positively identified the remains as Kada. Um, in that shallow grave, I mean, I don't know the exact time frame, but it almost appears like within a few days she was buried. Like by the
Yep.
7th or the 8th, she was buried.
Hmm.
Um, and then she wasn't found until the 18th. What kind of forensic, I guess, what kind of forensic evidence could be developed at that burial site over that amount of time? And what forensic evidence might be lost?
Hmm. Okay. Well, let's start. Let's go back to the car real quick.
All right.
Not knowing where her death occurred. Okay, if the car used as a conveyance away from an initial primary site where she sustained this gunshot wound, or maybe there was also an adjunct sexual assault that took place in that location. They put her in a car, and now you have a major problem on your hand if you're a perpetrator. I've got a body. I don't know what to do with the body. Well, why would you move the body from the initial site? Why would you place this body in a car? Why not just abandon the body where it was perpetrated? Well, then you begin to think about the mindset of the perpetrator. I have to take the body, sequester the body, so no one will find the body. And then they go back after a period of time and they say, "Oh, well, after I've deposited the body, now I'm going to have to do something with the car." And it's just dumb luck that you know fire responded to this thing and put it out, and then they haul it off and crush it. All right. So that would be one to his benefit at that point in time. But they wind up finding the body and they're able to track all this back and kind of stitch it together with the electronics. This is the timeline on this thing is really fascinating to me. Also, if you couple this with the idea that whoever she was talking to that night, with these text messages, they're going back and forth when she got to work, and that it happened so quickly at work. It's kind of fascinating as well.
Why is
How
that
long?
fascinating to you?
I think that it's fascinating because the the text had I'm not going to say, and we don't know everything that was contained. Well, I don't know. Maybe we do, but there's this is, I hate to keep using this word, but there's a hint of intimacy here. And I'm not saying that they're like physically intimate. It's like, this person, you know, because look, you're at risk. You show up, and particularly at a medical facility, and, to anybody in the audience that works in a medical facility, whether it's hospital, care home, assisted living, whatever, that time when she got to work is a very critical time. And it's something that if you've ever had loved ones in the hospital, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about is shift change. And it
Mm.
is frenetic. It's a nightmare because you're having to pass on information to the oncoming shift. Well, she steps out right after her shift has started. That's kind of a critical time. And plus, if you have people that, and I don't know to what degree they are intensely taking care of people, is it assisted living in the sense that there is a nursing station there, or is it assisted living where, the CNAs or maybe on-site nurse has an office they'll just go and sit in? But somebody has to administer drugs, perhaps,
Yeah.
particularly those that are not doing well. So you're having to go around and do bed checks, make sure everybody's in the bed. If you've got people that have memory issues, you have to make sure that they're tucked in, they're secure in their location. And at that critical point in time, when she's doing this, and she's walking out the door, that's kind of, it kind of puts a target at that moment in time. I just, it would be different in my mind if she had responded to a call, say closer to midnight.
Hmm.
She knows she's going to work, and whoever it is that texted her knew that she was going to work as well. So she's going to go out and meet them out there. Why is this happening? Why is it happening at this moment in time? So she felt like it was worth taking the risk, maybe the risk of, coming under fire from a supervisor because it's a critical moment in time to step outside. And the next thing you know, we don't have hide and hair of her at that point in time. She just
The
vanished.
fascinating thing to me there is that this is a medical facility, and
Yeah, I
apparently
know
we
what you're
don't
going to say.
have
No
video.
CC. Yeah, I know. I know that was amazing to me. And again, there are anytime the term I've tried to be very careful. Anytime the term assisted living center is used, that can mean there's a whole spectrum of things that can
Sure.
mean. Okay. Many times people have gotten away from the term nursing home for whatever reason. Uh, you hear retirement home over the
Yeah.
past. You have assisted living. Well, assisted living implies that you need assistance,
Hmm.
and that's going to come in various degrees because not everybody's going to require the same assistance. You have people that have physical issues that they have to get taken care of. You got people that have medication issues, food issues, and you've got people that have not psych problems, but you have people that might be suffering from memory issues where
Yeah.
they're almost like a childlike state. Um,
What happens if
and
one of those walk off?
yeah, 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 and it's not.
Yeah.
And again, back to the CCTV thing. Um, it's kind of critical in a facility like this. I can't tell you over the years how many skeletal remains. You're going to find this really wild. How many skeletal remains I've worked of the elderly that had memory issues, that wandered away from facilities. And in the South, we have, and if I have any Southerners listening, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. We have these vast fields of kudzu, and it's this vine, that grows all over the South. Um, Actually consumes buildings, by the way. And I found, I can't tell you how many skeletal remains I've found in patches of kudzu where you have this, they're almost in a childlike state and they just kind of wander off. They look for a cool place to lay down. They'll lay down in a patch of kudzu and they'll die of exposure. So there's a real risk here. You can have people, one of my best friends, their parent had dementia and they walked out of the facility and drowned at a
Oh,
pond, at a
terrible.
pond on the property and walked into the pond. So yeah, and I'm hoping that we're taking more due care at these facilities. But that to me was really striking. That and also how did she exit the building? How was she intending to get back in? Is there a card swipe? Is
Yeah.
there electronic key? Do you have to punch in a code? I don't know. Does she have a standard key? Where you have to unlock the door? I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things that I guess kind of strikes me is getting back to the scene where her remains were found. They described it as a shallow grave. Now, they
Yeah.
also described people coming and going from the car to the grave over the course of a couple days, actually. Um, I don't know how many people have worked on the end of a shovel. When I was 18 and 19 years old, 17, 18, 19 years old, I was a general laborer for a contracting company where we built gas stations. And so
Ugh.
I was the guy that after the backhoe or the excavator was pulling out big chunks of dirt, all I had to do was like just kind of clean it up. And that is really, really hard work. And putting gravel back in those trenches and filling them in and stuff like that. Working on the end of a shovel is really hard work.
It is.
I when I see in the movies, like I love the Taylor Sheridan westerns, Yellowstone
Hmm.
and whatever it is, 1888 and all that, where they're digging a grave for somebody and they get it down to like 6 feet. Well, that cut
Yeah.
had to take about 14 and a half hours for them to get down
Hmm.
six
Yeah.
feet, right? And so I had wondered, I wonder what the mindset of somebody like that is. Like somebody who hasn't worked at the end of a shovel yet, and they go, okay, well, we're going to bury her. And then 2 hours later, they're 6 inches down. And they've been working on this hard thing. And then okay, that's enough. We're just going
Yeah.
to put her in there and cover her up. Right. But
Yeah.
I mean, the, if she is in a grave, she's covered with dirt.
Hmm.
Getting back to that forensic thing, what are investigators like you finding in that kind of a scene?
Well, particularly considering how long she had been down, dirt, even a mounded earth, and this is what would be referred to as a clandestine grave. I'm actually in the middle of teaching a class in clandestine graves right now at my university at Jacksonville State, um, and uh, when you have a clandestine grave, it's a matter of there's a couple ways it works. First off, people can pre-dig holes if they're and of course that goes to the status of the mind
Mm,
relative to premeditation. You have
yeah,
intent to put something in there pre-dug, uh, and you don't have access to a backhoe, so you got to have strong back, you got to have patience, and most people peter out really quickly. I don't recall, Gavin, yeah, over the course of my career where I've ever worked a case involving a hand dug grave that was literally 6 feet deep. Uh, the most robust that was hand dug, and I've had people that have used excavators, okay,
hmm,
but um, hand dug grave, maybe 3 feet
yeah,
maximum in depth, and they will not be the right length. Inevitably, bodies are contracted. They're like, um, many times they're in almost a fetal position, and that goes to the exhaustion on the part of the person that is on the end of the handle.
yeah,
Uh, you get out into a wooded area like this, and you're talking about that's one of the reasons that they in this report they're talking about that there's evidence um, of turned earth. Well, the reason it's significant is because none of the other Earth is turned,
right,
and it's incredibly compacted out there. Uh, and so you'll see these bodies that are kind of contracted, balled up. Her state as well, and this needs to be remembered. You're talking about an individual that would be handling um, a pretty advanced body, pretty advanced decomposing body, moderately advanced decomposing body. This is something again that they're not used to doing,
right,
and you have to factor that in as well, right?
sure,
Because most people, I've had some of the most resilient, externally, some of the most resilient people in the world that are uniform cops that I'll go out on a scene on, and it's generally guys. Women don't flee from these scenes as much. Uh, I think it's my wife used to get on me because I had a problem changing dirty diapers on our babies. I could work with decomps all day long, but if I had to change a diaper, it's like, oh, But yeah, men in particular, they don't do real well around decomposing bodies many times. They're not as resilient as women are. And you put an individual in there, um, they're going to try to flee from it and get distance, and that winds up making this very shoddy work. It's not going to be sufficient depth. You would have to go down significantly and then repack the soil, because you can never get soil to look again like
Yeah.
it did in its pristine state. I think a lot of people just automatically think that when we we dig a hole, that we can just fill it back in. It's going to look exactly like it did. It's an empirical impossibility. You can't do that. And there's a variety of reasons. It's one of the things we talk about in clandestine burials, turbation in soil, the earth is moving, hydrology, things are changing beneath that we can't even begin to appreciate, soil composition, interaction with wildlife. There's all these things that factor into this, and it's going to change the appearance. And not to mention, just on the surface, where there's several species of wild grasses that, like in this area in Pennsylvania, there are native flora that grow in that area. Even if you've got a junked out area where debris is kind of cast aside in this wooded area, you're going to have these little sprigs of things, right? This
Hmm.
vegetation. Well, one of the first things you look for in a clandestine grave is you look for an absence of the native flora, because you will have turned it. And another thing, and I've seen this at graves, you'll actually see plants that are inverted and the roots are sticking up out of the
Yeah.
top of the
Yeah.
mound. There's your sign.
Yeah.
But you have to take real due care, when you're processing this thing, because you smell it, you know that there's things there. And I'm going to be very interested to see, I think, how they processed her grave, because that in and of itself, that's a completely different kind of crime scene processing, as
Yeah,
opposed to,
because
say, if you've got scattered.
when the cops find this clandestine grave, this site that they described as, you know, Earth had been turned, right?
Mhm.
They're not gonna start digging and looking for a body there, right? They're gonna call in experts, right?
It all depends on who shows up. If you've got somebody that is a bit overzealous, is not really the term, but if you get a young cop out there, maybe they've been feverishly looking for it. And sometimes you're human. We're always human, but you have the spark within you where you've been on the case, you've been looking for
Yeah.
for a person. You have to confirm it in your own mind. And sometimes people have a hard time pulling back from that. And I've seen people that have gotten out there and have dug through graves, and it doesn't help us, because if we suspect, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that you've got something decomposing. And look, if you call me out, or formerly, you could have called me out to a scene. If you smell something decomposing that's beneath the surface of the earth, if I dig this up and it's somebody's dog, I don't care. I'm glad you called me.
Yeah.
I'll take the time. We'll excavate it. We'll take a look at it. I would rather be safe. So that doesn't bother me. If you smell it, if you see turned earth, you need to go ahead and call the forensics people in my world, whether it's the crime scene techs, the forensic anthropologist, who I'm hoping showed up at the scene. Um, Penn State has got a really good anthropology program. And I don't know if they probably have a state forensic anthropologist. I don't know if they were consulted and brought in. Um, but to have them there, because it's amazing. Forensic anthropologists are really amazing people, because it's not just about looking at bones. They're actually pretty decent geologists as well.
Oh
That's a
yeah.
big part of it. Yeah, they can look at things on the ground, and they can see things that you and I cannot see. Like, it's almost like a fire investigator as well. You take when I walk onto a fire scene, if I have an arson case, a death that's in a burned out building, I look around. Somebody has to point me to where the body is, because everything's gray or black, or
Yeah.
muddy. Uh, But arson investigator can look at that environment and they'll say, "Oh, well, this is where this happened. This is where that happened." Same thing with forensic anthropology slash archaeology. Um, they look at this turned soil and they can look for little nuances, little artifacts, if you will, along the way that are going to tell that story. And you don't want to disturb any of that before they have time. They will literally do, they talked about doing a grid search. There's two different types of grid searches. You can do a grid search where you're literally searching for a body, but with a grave, you will create another grid, okay, that runs the the vertical axis of the body and also the horizontal axis, and that's you kind of place this thing around. You have it's almost like you sunk my battleship. You have these individual gray grids, and you'll
Mm.
excavate each grid along the way until you get down below. You go subsurface with it. Now, pretty soon, you'll get to the point where you'll see an arm, you might see a finger, and your inclination is you want to start brushing, but no matter how much you brush things away, you're not going to bring her back to life. She's dead. So it's better to take your time and clean away everything, because within each one of those grids, and the grids are generally about, maybe it all depends on who's directing the dig. I've seen them be as small as like 6 inches by 6 inches. I've seen them out to 12 inches by 12 inches. And you excavate each one of those grids, and you're many times we're scooping out that shovel, and you see us using sifters at the scene. We'll take it over. There's generally a bucket person that takes the bucket over there. You've got the hands and knees people that are down there, kind of doing this. And you got another person at the station that's going through every little bit there. Okay. Now, I don't know if they did that. For all I know, they just brushed the dirt away and had at it. I
Yeah.
hope that they took time, because fire has been involved in this case. I don't know if it touched her. I don't
Well,
think it did, but you have to, and that makes things particularly brittle. Okay.
one of my questions is I thought that, in my mind, I feared that there was probably a sexual component to this. Um, if she died on the 4th and she was found on the 18th, what is the likelihood that there would be a biological anything left over to be able to prove whether or not she had been assaulted that way?
To a certain degree, I think that it's possible. The one major problem you have to overcome is if there is a perpetrator out there that is thinking ahead far enough to um, see if I can do this in polite company, to flush the body, clean the body in a postmortem state, um, then um, you you would you can find evidence of sexual assault, and that's going to be compromised. If there's any kind of seminal deposition or anything like that. But the one thing you're looking for, and this is going to be kind of difficult too, um, is going to be any kind of sexual related trauma,
Uh,
like where you have a forced sexual assault. Um, and let's face it, sexual assaults are forced. All right.
yeah.
And so, um, and you can get trauma, external trauma. You can get internal trauma with that as well. There would be evidence of that. And then, but to complicate matters is that if you're in the midst of this kind of linear time of decomposition, you can misinterpret, you know, um, injuries that may have taken place either in the antemortem or what's called the perimortem state, where they're like right in the midst of dying. Some of that stuff can be misinterpreted, so you have to be very very careful. It's kind of a conundrum, because with bodies that are in a moderate to advanced state of decomposition, I mean, even us, we don't want to linger around remains any longer than we have to. However, by virtue of what you're trying to do from an evidentiary standpoint, it's almost mandated that you take more time being around a remain that is severely decomposed, because it's so easy to miss things, because you're fighting against nature, and nature consumes things. That's just what nature does, and so that's that can be very, very difficult.
Robin says it's true about the stinky stuff. My daughter can deal with decomp, but cleaner cat boxes, no way. This is actually reminding me something that you said, and I may have shared this with you before, but in my day job, this was a couple of years ago. I was interviewing our county coroner. We were at like a coffee shop, and I was interviewing her for a story, and she got a call, and she needed to go to a death scene.
Hmm.
So she asked me, "Do you want to go?" Yeah, I'm down. So I join her. I follow her in my car, and we head out to a neighboring city. And it was a case where a man had died, like, and he'd been in his apartment for like a week.
Hmm.
We get there, and all of these big burly police officer military types are standing outside, and they're going, "I'm not going near that place."
Hmm.
Right. And so she goes, "Well, come help me, Gavin." And we go inside and we find a decedent who was a large man,
Hmm.
big man, that required muscles in order to, after the investigation was done, to get him to the funeral home. Um, those cops would not go near it.
No,
They
they won't.
they weren't. It didn't matter. Our coroner is like 85 pounds soaking wet.
Yeah,
She's not going to be able to do this on her own, and those cops would not do it.
cops,
They
cops,
would say like,
yeah,
they don't pay me to do that.
yeah, cops flee from that. You know who goes to it,
Hmm.
who's always willing to lend a hand, and I love cops. I mean, I teach
It's
and
the
train cops.
firefighters, right?
Yeah, I love firefighters because they travel around in like a gaggle, and they're like, is there what do you need? Is there
Yeah.
anything we can do to help you?
How can I be of
And
service? Yes.
yeah, and that's what I love about firefighters. So, and I've had to go into some of the most austere environments to retrieve bodies and to work cases. And they would like, now we're right here if you need anything. Do you want us to, like, I remember I had to descend down into the empty bowels of a super tanker that was moored and the thing had been carrying oil, and the guy had fallen through the hatch and impacted on the ribbing down in the bottom, and he
Oh.
died. And I had to descend the ladder, and the ladder's about this wide, and I don't even know how many stories. I was terrified, and they had cinched me up, and because I had to go examine the body and take pictures of the body down in the bottom of this thing. And of course, they send a basket down, and I'm having to load the basket by myself, with a body bag. I just kind of let the body bag free fall, through the air until
Hmm.
it hit into the base of the ship. Firefighters are that way, though. They don't run away from things like that. Cops, it's like, I don't want to mess up my uniform, man.
I know.
And so
Well,
yeah, they'll stay away. But on one other note, my wife, who one of the things that she would ask every day, literally every day when I would get home from work, and this is kind of a sad commentary, she'd meet me at the back door, and your family gets so involved in what you do as a death investigator, and they understand it. Thankfully, thank God for my wife, because she understood, and still understands all the other craziness I'm involved in. Um, she would she would meet me at the door and say, "Did you work a decomp today?" And I would say, "Yeah." She'd say, "Take your clothes off." And I'd have to take my clothes off there on the stoop in the backyard. I'd have to put them in a bag. She'd bag them up, and she would wash them. And so that's kind of the nature of it,
well,
and
that
what
leads
you
me
do.
into a question that occurred to me is that, like, okay, if these, let's call them, these, I guess, defendants or assailants or whatever, the Confederates who were putting poor Kada in that grave, would there be, how long? I mean, I would imagine that there would be transfer of decomp to them, either like
Mhm.
full on fluid or airborne or something like that. Is that something that police um would find evidentially speaking? Like,
Yeah, yeah, perhaps, and also soil transfer. Here's a good one. Again, this brings in a practice that not many people know about. It's forensic geology, because let's just say you've got a defendant that is domiciled in another location away from this area, and say the area where Kata's remains were deposited, uh, that soil there is going to be very specific to that
Right.
geographic location. So if you're digging down in a hole, and let's say the soil in that location has more of a loamy consistency to it or sandy consistency, if they retain that clothing, and you can also find it on people's shoes as well, and you take that home and you try to stow those clothes somewhere and you don't clean them effectively. And when I say effectively, I mean like effectively, to get rid of any remnant. They can take that clothing, and they can't say that you, in fact, were there. However, they can build out a case to say, if they get a forensic geologist on the stand and say, what's the likelihood that you would find this particular soil
Right.
in on this individual who is not domiciled in this location? Now, I don't know how desperately different it is where this individual is domiciled as opposed to where Kata was buried, or geologically. Many times that will apply to larger areas, uh, but it's certainly something to consider. We do things with pollens as well on bodies and
Hmm.
on defendants if we find certain pollens, and again that gets into forensic botany, code.
And those can be very micro, like I what do I know about this? But I know that when I go to my honey guy,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
he has different flavor honey from places
Yep.
that are only like 3 or 4 miles apart.
Yep. Yep. You're absolutely right. We have the same thing here. Our departmental administrator, her and her husband are honey people, and I buy their honey not just because I like it. I use it as a medicine, because if I take a dose of that honey, uh, uh, it's going to knock down any kind of sinusitis that I might have relative to the environment around me.
Yeah.
So but yeah, those are certainly issues as well. I'm right now. What I'm very interested in, I think, is going to be her body, obviously in the grave, but anything that may have fallen off of somebody. I've worked
Hmm.
cases where I actually worked a case that was solved by a guy that took a filtered cigarette. As There were two escapees out of a penitentiary in Florida many years ago, and killed a guy in the French Quarter and beat him to death with a camera tripod,
Oh my
and
goodness.
took him out in the swamp and buried him. And one of the guys was smoking Marlboro Lights, and he thumped the filter into the grave and then dumped the body on top of the filter. Well,
Thank
we were
goodness
able
for
to retrieve.
stupid criminals. Yeah, that's
Yeah, it did.
amazing.
So you'd be surprised what people leave behind, because this is the thing. They have this thing in their mind. I'm doing all this work to dig the hole. Ergo, no one's going to find it because I'm concealing the body. So anything they leave behind, they get careless many times. Anything they leave behind, that very well might um, be the thing that's going to turn the case, because they're careless. They don't. These people get into this frenetic race when they're trying to get distance between themselves and the body.
Right.
Um, I've got all the time in the world when I show up. I've got people bringing me coolers of cold drinks and sandwiches. I've got a place to go sit in the shade. I can, go cool off for a few minutes, put my gloves back on, walk back over there, and I can stay out there. I've stayed at scenes for 5 days at a time.
No
It
pressure.
makes no difference. No, I have no pressure other than to do an excellent job, or try to do an excellent job. I've failed many times, but trying to do an excellent job while I'm there, and trying to serve the people that I'm with, because I'm no anthropologist, but I'm a good shovel leaner. And so I don't mind being in the dirt with bodies and aiding in that process. I've done it for a long, long time. I saw a question just a
Yeah,
moment
we
ago.
got a
As a matter of
question
fact,
here I want to bring back up. There are a couple.
yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
who was it? Carrie that had asked
Yeah.
about the why do you see backhoes? I think there was a backhoe. Thinking back to the kids with the Daybell case,
Yeah, they
they
did.
they have, yeah. So uh, many times what they'll do with backhoes is they will dig out peripheral to where they think the central area is, and they'll scrape off that surface area um, of untouched soil, and they'll get all of the flora out of the way, clear out an area. Most of the time, you're not going to go directly in. And can I plug something real quick? I don't have any uh, skin in the game. I'm just
Yeah, go for it.
telling people that are really interested in forensics and are interested in a fascinating case. I show this in my clandestine. As a matter of fact, I showed a bit of it this week in my class, and that's the famous King in the Car Park about Richard III. That happened in Leicester, England, a few years ago. His body had been lost. He was killed in a battle, and
Oh, right.
they
Yeah, I
found his
totally forgot
body
about this.
buried. Yeah, and they had skid steers out there, and they were pulling. Well, you have to pull off the asphalt, and then to begin to dig down. This is really fragile remains. I urge anybody that has never heard of this case, uh, do yourself a favor, look it up on YouTube. I don't know where the full actual original run of this thing is. It is absolutely fascinating. If you're interested in history, um, uh, particularly English history, and and this is a case of absolute dumb luck where they put shovel to dirt and almost immediately hit on human remains, and it turned out to be Richard III
Richard the
King.
Third. Yeah,
Yeah,
crazy.
and so if you get a chance, yeah, and so that made me flash back to that point. So most of the time, you're not going to use a backhoe per se to dig in the primary site. You'll clear out the area around it, uh, and it certainly wouldn't be used in any site I was in charge of because I'd rather blister my hands and break sweat and make sure that I got everything instead of some big chomp where they come in and just kind of dig it out. But
Yeah.
that the surface layer, you're going to have to get rid of that, particularly if it's highly compacted. You've got grass that's growing in there, any kind of other flora. You want to clear that out, and then you'll dig down. Sometimes you'll dig peripheral to that and kind of work your way in, and it's
Well,
tedious.
and like in the Vallow case,
Yeah.
um, those kids were in the dirt way longer than a week
Oh
and a
yeah.
half, right?
Oh yeah. 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 They were in there for a protracted period of time, and JJ was remarkably well preserved.
Hmm.
Of course, going back to this idea of desecration of human remains, the the daughter, uh, can't believe this now. Her name is literally flown out of my brain. That is so sad. I covered that forever. I remember JJ, and I know
JJ and oh my goodness, I'm blanking.
somebody, yeah, somebody will remember. I'm sure. You know, her body was desecrated. I think that in that case, I think that they were not. Uh, they they were frustrated over the fact that they couldn't get her body fully incinerated. Somebody took, I think, a pickaxe, struck her in the pelvis with it,
Oh
or
my
struck her
goodness.
remains in the pelvis with it. Yeah. So, and again, and then they did this horrible job of trying to cover the remains and dishonoring human remains by burying them
Tylee.
in
Tylee
Tyler.
Ryan. There we
Yeah,
are.
thank you very much. Yeah. So, yeah, um,
Let's see. This
you know,
next question is how far did the police search to miss the area where she was found? I think maybe another way to rephrase that is some. Does it take specialized training sometimes to be able to find even a clandestine grave that's I guess new?
uh, specialized training. No, not necessarily, and we kind of keep it very simple. Most of the time, I'm an old soldier. I was in the army. I went through army training. I was in reserves, but uh, you know, uh, in the army, they make you do pointless things like policing an area. It's not pointless. They want you to go out and pick up trash. But this is something that applies in police work and investigative work. We will literally stand shoulder to shoulder, and you see people doing this in particularly when we have remains that are found um, uh, in landfills. walking shoulder to shoulder, and you're doing it step by step by step. Okay. And then you carry markers with you. These little, they almost look like, have you ever seen the little flags that they use to mark like gas pipes, in
Yeah.
the ground? This little,
Yeah.
and, you know, survey markers, that sort of thing. And they come in a variety of colors. So if you find something, you can, you know, post that in the ground, and then everybody freezes. And then you call the forensic anthropologist up, say, is this something? You know,
No,
and that's
wow.
kind of the way you do it. So it's kind of a broad stroke, but you're doing kind of a micro search in your own way. That is, if you can get everybody on board. Now, I've worked cases where we have used police cadets, from the police academy. We've walked shoulder to shoulder with them. Um, one of the one of the weird things is I've actually worked these cases with prisoner trustees,
Hmm.
and they'll bring
Where
people out
there,
that are trustees from the jail and do these recoveries. And many times they're very good at it. Uh, they welcome the opportunity to get out, and this is
right?
a horrible thing to get out with. But I've worked
Exercise
these.
your brain a little bit.
Yeah, yep.
Okay. Let's see. Another one came in, and then I have a couple of questions about another case for you. If Kada was in the abandoned school and the school had black mold, would that be important forensically, especially if in her lungs?
Only if she had been alive in there, and she had been alive in there for a protracted period of time, in order to understand where you're going with that, and could have gotten into her airway. But it would have been a matter of her, actually inhaling, taking breaths in there and being around the mold if it was in there. It's an excellent question from a scientific standpoint. Um, and at autopsy, when you're examining the airway and examining the lungs, it's certainly something, it could manifest, I think, and I don't know enough about it to speak really intelligently about it, but uh, you could certainly do examinations microscopically and maybe look for certain presentations. But generally, you're going to have there's going to be a period of time for this to develop. It's like any other kind of thing that we encounter. I was just talking about honey, and those sorts of things, to kind of knock down sinusitis and those sorts of things. It takes a while for that stuff to kind of ramp up. So, and I think this is a valid point too. Was the school used as a place where she may have been attacked? Can you gain access to it? How easy is it? I wonder how thoroughly that area would um, uh, was searched as well.
Yeah.
That structure, to see if
Yeah. Of
anything had been facilitated in there. And you never know what other nefarious activities been going on in an abandoned building like that as well.
course. Yeah.
And is it known to those that run in these circles? So I don't know.
Yeah. That is a very good question. Okay. I want to just briefly take us over to the case of Celeste Rivas Hernandez, who her decomposing body was found in the trunk of a Tesla Model X. I know that you've covered this case. You've looked at this case a little bit. We don't really need to rehash it, but I have a very similar question that I told my audience I would ask you. And that is, I mean, this girl could have been in that Tesla for weeks, maybe months. It's very difficult to say what the timeline is.
Mhm.
It does appear, at least there's been the rumblings of it, so we don't know that this is another very ugly case of maybe she was dismembered as well in order to fold inside that enclosed area. Would there still be forensic value? Would there be evidence that could be collected from a death scene like that may be days, weeks, or even months old?
Oh yeah, yeah. There there would be significant value there forensically, scientifically. The first thing, if you begin to talk about dismemberment, that comes to mind for me um, is first off, you're going to be looking on surfaces of the bone in particular. You're going to be looking for tool marks. That's something we take very, very seriously in dismemberment cases. We will actually uh, um, segment the bone and where you have striations on the surface of the bone. Our purpose for doing that, and we'll collect that bone at, like, that bone will not go with the body when the body's released. Never.
Keep a
We
sample.
we retain it. Yeah, we retain it. People think that's kind of ghoulish. Dave and I actually, on the anniversary of Lizzie Borden this past, uh, whenever it was, August, or I can't remember. They brought in the skulls of both both the parents in that case. Can you imagine doing that today? And they'd rendered the skulls down. They'd retained those bone samples, and there's value in that. I think that it was used to for theater, in the Borden case. But
Mm,
yeah, we retain the bone because the idea is if we can find something in the house or on the property that could have created these striations, you have to do. It's just like ballistics. You have to do a comparison with tool mark people. People don't understand many times the structure of crime labs. Tool mark people and ballistic people, many times, well, they can be one and the same. There are cases in bigger labs or situations in bigger labs where we'll have a separate tool mark section from ballistics, but they're generally kind of under the same roof, kind of do the same thing. They're looking
okay.
for imprint and impression stuff. So that's a big thing. And then I don't think that she would have been if she was dismembered. I still have yet to be able to confirm that
Sure.
because there have been these comments along the way where um, it doesn't necessarily mean she was decomposing. I mean, she was dismembered. I think one non-specific law enforcement person made this comment to a reporter, and it has yet to scientifically be verified to me. And I don't believe anything the cops say. I want to hear it come out of the mouth of the ME coroner in LA County. I want to hear what they have to say because they're the ones doing the examination on the body. And most of the time, that information is going to come to the cops from the ME. So
Right.
I want to hear what the ME, and the ME has been deathly quiet, no pun intended, on this particular case.
I feel like
Uh,
that pun was intended, Joseph.
no, it really wasn't. I promise. I'm too tired to make puns. Yeah, I, but I will say this, Gav. My thought is that if she was, you're not going to go to the trunk, the frunk, or whatever they call this damn thing. I'd never heard that term before. Um, you're not going to dismember a body in a frunk. Okay, uh,
Right.
you have to have, in order to do dismemberment, you have to have privacy. You have to have water. You have to have a source of electricity if you're going to use some tool other than a handheld saw. Uh, and I've seen people use all manner of things that are, I've seen people try to use butter knives before. Um, so you're going to have privacy to do it because you're not going to go in the backyard and do this. If something happened inside of that dwelling, there's going to be a treasure trove. They're not going to get everything. I can tell you if you go in there to clean it up, because you're talking about when dismemberment occurs. Please forgive me for saying this, but people have to understand how this works. If you do dismemberment, just like when you're sawing on like a 2x4, what do you create other than the mark on the wood
Yeah.
when you're sawing? You create
Sawdust.
sawdust. Well, you create bone dust as well. It's very similar, actually. We create it in the morgue all the time. You hear that high pitched saw that we use. It's called striker saw. It's a bone saw that we open the skull with. We cut bones with it, the whole 9 yards. And it's histamine like. It goes
Yeah.
everywhere, man. I mean, it really does. So there would be a remnant of that. That contains DNA. Um, you're also going to have what happens. This is kind of an interesting thing when you do this. You have blood, um, and even there's going to be blood even if she's not alive. It creates almost like a paste.
Mm,
You can imagine what it's like mixing water and flour, right?
yeah.
So you take blood and bone dust, it makes these little pellets many times, and they're left behind, and they're really hard to get up. So you'll find that,
Probably pretty
and
sticky, right? They
they
stick
are,
to.
they are.
Yeah.
And the other thing about it is that this stuff attracts flies as well because it's organic material. It's
Yeah.
decomposed blood. blood is not just a standalone substance by itself; it's multi-component, and so you've got RBCs, you've got WBCs. There's multiple components of blood. All this stuff is separating, it's decomposing. All right, um, so you're going to have that issue. I've thought about this case quite a bit, and I'm really wondering. First off, I'd love to know how she died. I think that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing, and how that was facilitated. Um, was she actually killed in that house, or did she die in that house? Let me see. How can I rephrase that? Uh, did her life end in that house? I don't know what manner that might be. Uh, was it trauma related? Was it drug related? I don't know. Did she have a heart attack? At that
Yeah.
age, probably not. Um, and if she died in that house, how did her death come about? How did it come about? Frenchie has wanted to
Hey,
join.
Frenchie.
Uh, um, we, you think about um, you think about how this was facilitated in this home, and why 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 this car. Uh, and here's kind of an interesting aside about this. Um, was that was her body in the house decomposing, uh, and they just couldn't take it anymore. The the body is removed from the house, placed in the trunk, held in stasis in the trunk inside the garage, can't take it anymore. So then you take the car, back it out, and move it down the street, okay, from that location. And I don't know if you guys have ever been to this area in Hollywood Hills. Um, I don't move in those circles, but I'm friends with this guy that won an Academy Award. That's a documentary guy, and I stayed in a house like right by Chateau Marmont, and this is within I think 2 miles of Chateau Marmont. The people that live there are like the Jimmy Kimmels of the world. He literally lives in this area.
Yeah.
These people do not abide having beaters out on the street. And you're talking about a
Right.
car that's damaged,
Thing
that's
was
collecting
covered
dust,
dust.
it's
Yeah.
covered in dust and all that sort of thing. I'm surprised that no one took notice of it. People walk their dogs around there. I'm really shocked that maybe someone didn't smell this and
Didn't
report it.
detect it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are several questions. And if you've got a decomposing body that's been moved, okay, first off, you've got trauma that might be associated with a death. You've got postmortem trauma that might be associated with a dismemberment. Then you've got decompositional remnant in maybe multiple locations. I don't know. It kind of baffles the mind, and they've gone radio silent on the case. And I think that some of it has to do with the status of her body, where I don't even know if they were able to do tox. Um, I've heard several things about the status of her body that gave me the impression that it wasn't as far along as some people have opined.
Hmm.
And then I've heard other people say that it was in a really advanced state of decomposition. So I don't know. I mean, and I can't imagine this thing is going to remain radio silent for longer,
Yeah.
for
I'd,
much
I'd
longer.
wondered
They've got
about
to say
that.
something.
I had wondered if they're waiting on talks. That could be a month or two, but yeah,
Yeah,
that,
but we've gone down that road, and if she was decomposed, and I'll go ahead, and this is kind of a little insight into forensics. I'll let you guys um, know this as well. What do we do with decomposed bodies if we're trying to do tox? Okay, people ask that question. There's a couple of places we go. Um, uh, Sometimes blood will be in such an advanced state that it's non-viable to do tox screening with. Sometimes, if you have a bladder that contains urine, a significant sample, we will we can draw that up, see what we can get out of there. We'll go to the eyes and draw out vitreous, which is a
oh, yeah.
fluid. Yeah, and it's very non-specific. You can't really get a what's called a quantitative amount in there, but you can get a qualitative amount. It's almost like reading the rings on a tree. where you can see drought and an overabundance of water, that sort of thing. You can say that something's present. The other thing that we do with advanced decomp is we'll take sections of liver and brain, put them in a centrifuge, spin them down, liquefy them, we'll draw those up, and we can again qualitatively say that yes, there is drug X here. Okay, but again, you can't quantify it, and that's one of the big questions. I had some people ask me on some news platform at some point in time. They want to know, could this have been a drug OD? At this point, I don't know that you would be able to calibrate your instrumentation to the point where you could come up with a
Hmm.
quantitative amount to say, because with every drug that's out there, even illicit drugs, folks don't realize this, even with illicit drugs, did you know there is actually what's referred to as a therapeutic range? So
Of
you can have
course.
heroin. You can have
Yeah.
heroin and they will say, well, it's within the therapeutic range. And many times, what they mean by that, but they're not saying it in the report, is that your status is still compatible with life. There's not enough on board to kill you, so it's within therapeutic.
I see.
within, but um, when you get off into some of these other pharmacology, into some of these other prescribed drugs, there we have regular clinical ranges that we look for, and it
Okay.
can be very broad spectrum. So sorry, I didn't mean to go
Okay.
down that road, but
I'm
I,
I'm
you know,
going to I'm going to open up Pandora's box. You've already been very generous with your time, but I just want to get your quick take on the report that came out in the Ellen Greenberg case.
vomit inducing. That's my.
Yeah.
I felt ill. I felt ill
Yeah.
afterwards, and I think the other thing that really um, kind of drove it home is that they went so far uh, um, to make note of other injuries,
Yes.
that she allegedly discovered. More contusions, more sharp force injuries, and yet here we are. And it
Yeah.
doesn't it doesn't it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is how it's impacting Sandy and Josh.
Yeah.
At,
I-
at the end of the day, because I and you're more vested than I am, my friend. I know that, but I've been covering it for so long, and um, I, my heart just breaks for them. I mean, it
yeah.
really does. And I think the real downside of this is that this is not a judicial finding. This is a medical legal finding. Who are you going to appeal to? There is no court of medical legal
Exactly.
appeal.
I wish
And
everybody
so,
understood that. That
yeah, I think a lot of people say, well, we'll go back to court. This is
there
not,
isn't.
this is not something, I think if there is any kind of judicial relief, if you will, maybe that's not the right terminology. I don't know. In this thing, it's going to be found in the civil realm, maybe,
Yeah.
um, unless someone metaphorically has a come to Jesus moment, um, and says, you know, uh, I confess to this, or something like that is going to happen. I don't necessarily see a way forward. The answer is certainly not dog the bounty hunter, uh, which
Sure.
made my which made my toes curl when where were you, all these years ago? Um, and that's another kettle of fish, as they say. But
Well, when I talked
uh,
with Josh and Sandy, they said they felt punched in the gut, but
yeah,
they didn't expect anything else out of Philadelphia.
no, and
And
I wouldn't either. I think that some people have hoped, and I've been trying to. Maybe you can help me with this, because I've had people say, "Well, let's get the feds involved in it." Okay, well, how are the feds going to enter into this? Well, the
yeah,
only way I could really see the feds coming into this, if there's some kind of provable, potentially provable malfeasance in office. That's really the
Yes,
only way I
that's all
think that
I've
the
come to.
Fed. Yeah,
If
I
there's
just
provable public corruption that that members of, well, not just the city of Philadelphia but the state of Pennsylvania. I mean, this went up to the attorney general's office. If there were provable, and the attorney general, by the way, everybody probably already knows, is now the governor of our state, a person who apparently has beef with me because he disinvites me every time he's in my area to any event. Pretty funny, but yeah, there has to be some kind of public corruption in order to get,
yeah,
uh,
that's really
or if
from
there,
a
or
criminal standpoint. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
if they could find some kind of, um, if they could find some kind of evidence of a cover up that used, um, communication facilities that may have passed over state lines, like emails and texts would all bounce all around all sorts of different servers and routers and
Yeah,
stuff.
but
So maybe there, but
I don't know if you're looking at that. We've already, not to say anything nefarious was done, but when you're having closed door meetings with the ME and you know with prosecutors and cops, and there's no, to the best of my knowledge, there's no documentation of that meeting, but uh, status of the case has changed. That's problematic, and I don't, because I've been around politicians long enough to know what they will and will not write down, and
yes.
what will there be a record of? I Here's the thing about it. I don't know, and this is very sad commentary. I don't know what kind of appetite the feds would have for it, to take it on, and then, and I think that there's always been a smattering of politicism. I'm probably understating that, Gavin, but uh, then Ellen's case truly does become a political football at that point in time, because that's what that's the road that you're headed down. With that.
Yeah, I'm curious what Joe and Will do, the attorneys for the Greenbergs. When I
Yeah.
attended the hearing with Judge Carpenter, Joe had a little twinkle in his eye. And Judge Carpenter was even. So we're done with this, right? We probably will see each other again. Was kind of what she was hinting at. So we'll
Mhm.
see what happens there. And but yeah, the unfortunate thing about it is that, uh, a medical examiner's opinion is his or her opinion, and there is no
Mhm.
appeal anywhere.
There's no power to, or there's no process to appeal to with that. I mean, you can, I suppose you can take them to court, but that remedy has already been sought.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that even if you had a judge that might be favorable to want to hear, they're going to look at it, and I think that even their colleagues, or maybe the chief judge in whatever district, is going to raise an eyebrow over this. Said, we've covered this territory before, have we not? Um, and I, I don't know where Josh and Sandy go, from here. I really don't. And I don't normally get vested in cases that much, because I cover so many of them, and I just
Man,
go
I
from
do.
case to case. But yeah, I mean,
Too
and
much.
I hate to say that. There's only a certain amount of passion I have, and I try to reserve that for my family,
Yeah.
passion and love, and but with this case in particular, you know, I see myself and my wife and Josh and Sandy's shoes with our kids. I think a lot of parents have. It's not just me. I'm not doing that in isolation. I'm not some paragon. A lot of people do, because this really tugs at your heartstrings as a parent. And this is their only child. Not that it would be any less woeful if they had, a whole
10
uh,
children.
batch
Yeah.
of kids. Yeah, it's still your baby.
But it also
And
means they had dreams of being grandparents, and they had dreams
right,
of all sorts of things
yeah,
that were stolen from them. They're just snatched
yeah,
right at them. So, yeah. Well, man, thanks for your comments. Thanks for your time.
of course,
I
yeah.
really
Yeah.
appreciate it, and it's always fun to have you on.
Oh, I love joining you guys. uh, your family here is always so generous and so kind to me, and I appreciate being on air with you guys and chatting. I love to chat. Can't keep my mouth shut most of the time. But yeah, because I like to educate people on forensics. That's what I hate to say passion is, but it's what my kind of my purpose in life has always
It's what
been
you
since I
do.
was very young. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's who I am, and I don't. I, I'm very blessed and fortunate in the sense that I've had an opportunity to have a career in forensics. I have been educated in forensics, and I teach forensics. And many people that are interested in true crime, they don't have that opportunity. They go out and they do really hard jobs, and my job is not hard anymore. And so this is like the one gift that I can give to people. And my education might not be the best for the people that are out there, but I try my own little way to contribute that way. And plus to try to, dispel like ignorance,
Yeah.
if I can, and have a good time while we're doing it, because science is fun, man.
Well, before we go, let's do a quick plug. I mean, Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan is anywhere you get podcasts, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's on all platforms. I do. I don't know if anybody in the audience has been listening to True Crime Tonight Radio. It's
How's
um,
that going?
it's going great. I really enjoy it. I appear every Sunday night. We do Scientific Sundays, and so the ladies on the panel will ask me scientific questions. And just so you know, it's on iHeartRadio, and so we're on terrestrial radio shows stations live. You can actually call in and chat with us. They
Awesome.
do DMs and messages and that sort of thing. So yeah, yeah, and check out our program if you've got kids that are coming up and you're thinking about sending them to a great, safe campus that has a real family atmosphere and it's very inexpensive. Check out Jacksonville State University in Jacksonville, Alabama, not Florida. We're in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, beautiful campus, and we have got arguably one of the best forensic investigation programs in the country. I have now, as of this semester, I have now a gross anatomy lab where I bring my undergraduate students in. We're doing a dissection on a human cadaver
Wow.
through the entirety of the semester. And so we're very proud of that. We have crime scene house, blood deposition lab, trace evidence lab, and all our kids go in there and learn. So it's a great
Amazing.
environment to be in. Yeah, yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. And if you'll stick around for just 1 second while I outro this thing, I'll be right back
Yeah,
with you. Okay. Guys, again, I mean, I can't even tell you how grateful I am that Joseph will join us and talk about these cases that we talk about here on the channel. Check out Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan wherever you listen to podcasts. You can reach me at gavinfish.com. If you're on Facebook, just search Gavin Fish. Look for the fish tank. That's where we hang out on Facebook. You're always welcome there. Big shout out to my mods who keep everything classy and awesome. Thank you all for working so hard, and thanks for your comments. We didn't get to very many tonight, but it's because we can just go so deep in the conversation and learning about these cases from a forensic perspective. So with that, I will bid you adieu. Thank you very much for being here, and I will see you. No show tomorrow because it's Halloween, so I will see you on Monday. Take care. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below.